These are the 5 players I'm avoiding drafting in 2026 fantasy football. And we started off at the top. We're starting off with Ashton Jeanty, who is coming off the board as player number 10 in fantasy football. And ladies and gentlemen, I am just a little perplexed by Ashton Jeanty's rise, because last year he was coming off the board as RB6, and then he finished as RB16, which was almost minus 10 off of what his ADP was. And we understand why Ashton Jeanty finished so low. Ashton Jeanty was playing for the Raiders, and anybody who watched Pete Carroll-led Raiders last year knew how bad it was. Number one, Brock Bowers got hurt. Brock Bowers did not look like Brock Bowers. The offensive line was one of the worst in football, and this was the worst team in football because they ended up getting the number 1 pick, and we see them draft Fernando Mendoza. And while Fernando Mendoza, that is exciting, they signed Kirk Cousins in free agency, there is all the talk that, hey, we're going to be using Kirk Cousins, and we really don't want to start Fernando Mendoza, which is a lot of BS because Fernando Mendoza will probably be starting by week 6. But that still means either a young quarterback at the helm or Kirk Cousins who can't scramble, which should be good for Ashton Jeanty. But how good is this offensive line actually going to be under Clint Kubiak? And what's the overall snap share going to be for Ashton Jeanty? Now, if you take a look at Ashton Jeanty's year 1 historical comps and kind of project him going forward, there's really 8 main players that you can kind of compare the season to. You got Giovanni Bernard, 2014, Joe Mixon, 2019 season, Nick Chubb's 2019 season, Josh Jacobs, 2020 season, Le'Veon Bell's 2014 season, Josh Jacobs' 2021 season, Kenneth Walker's 2023 season, and then Kareem Hunt's 2018 season. Now, this is kind of the interesting part about what happened next for those players after their first season in the NFL. 3 of them improved, 2 of them held kind of similar value, and then 3 of them declined. So for me, as we're kind of taking a look at these historical comps, this to me just means there is pretty much a 50-50 chance, ladies and gentlemen, that Ashton Jeanty is going to either be valued at this or not. And when we're talking a range of running backs with, he's going in the back end of the first round, but then you look in the early part of the second round, you got Saquon Barkley, you got Amarian Hampton, you got Devon A. Chain, even Chase Brown. Like, I low-key like all those running backs more than I like Ashton Jeanty's current value. So what would I rather do? I'd rather prefer to get James Cook, and then if I'm doing a double hero RB build, I would rather draft James Cook and then one of those running backs, or worst case scenario, get me CeeDee Lamb on my team, and then I got CeeDee Lamb, stud wide receiver 1, and then I can go get my RB1 in the second round. And I think that's the biggest thing when we're taking a look at Ashton Jeanty's actual profile. 243 total fantasy points with that 14.3 average fantasy points per game. When we're talking about the league winners at the top last season, with Christian McCaffrey at 24.2, with Bijan Robinson at 21, 21.4 for Jahmyr Gibbs, even Jonathan Taylor up at 21.1, Devon A. Chain at 20. Like, anybody that exceeds that 20 to 21 fantasy point per game output is definitely a league winner. You get to that 22 threshold, in where Christian McCaffrey was at 24. I mean, that's absolutely game busters. So for us, you're kind of expecting Ashton Jeanty, where we're currently drafting him, to kind of go up 3 to 4 fantasy points per game, which does not seem like a lot when we're talking fantasy points per game, but that is a massive jump, and we're kind of banking on this Raiders team taking a major step up. And I just think that the difference in overall ADP value, I'd feel a lot better if maybe we were drafting Ashton Jeanty in the Amarian Hampton range, because even Saquon Barkley last season, finishing in that RB15 on a points per game basis range in a down year for Saquon Barkley, he's not even getting the benefit of a bounce back. Ashton Jeanty, again, going in the first round last season, then disappoints, and we're still redrafting him in the second half, and I think in the second season. And I think a lot of the reason that we're drafting him in his second season so high is because a lot of us play Dynasty Fantasy Football too, and we're super excited about the age. We know young running backs, they eventually break out. We saw that with Jahmyr Gibbs and Bijan Robinson. So a lot of people are projecting, hey, this is going to be Ashton Jeanty's absolutely game buster season. I understand the upside. I would just rather take a little bit of a safer option in round 1 and then absolutely hit on a running back in round 2.
Real quick before we jump back in, there are now 3 ways to get 4 for 4 for way less. Sign up at Rebet, a social sportsbook and casino where you deposit $10 with code 4 for 4 and you get our full picks package. All of our fantasy, DFS, and betting content, a $349 value for $10. That is 97% off. Prefer a prediction market like Kalshi? You can do the same on Novig and you get our base sub for $10. That is 75% off. Or just use code YouTube for 25% off any plan at checkout. Links and more details are at 4for4.com/plans, which is also linked down in the description.
My next player I'm avoiding in 2026 fantasy football drafts is going to be Kenneth Walker. And I understand the glitz, the glamour of Kenneth Walker, who's right now being drafted as the RB11 in multi-site ADP. And with Kenneth Walker, the big thing that we are continuing to see is the Kansas City Chiefs push up the board. And with Kansas City, we love this offense. We've seen them have absolutely electric weapons when it comes to Travis Kelce, when it comes to Tyreek Hill. There's a lot of great options, and even like a guy like a Kareem Hunt, Jerick McKinnon, and Isaiah Pacheco in years previous has shown some running back upside. But my big thing with Kenneth Walker is we're drafting this guy like he is about to turn into Saquon Barkley. And if you take a look at Kenneth Walker's fantasy football output, especially fantasy points per game over the last 4 seasons, the first 4 seasons of his career, 13.5, 13.3, 16.5, and then last year was 11.3 fantasy points per game in the 17 games that he played. Now, did he look absolutely electric in the Super Bowl? He did. But if you look at the historical comps that happened for last season and his 2025 season, we're really looking at Phillip Lindsay, Austin Eckler, Rashad White, David Montgomery, Chris Carson, James Conner, and Lamar Miller. While all those guys have been good running backs, and Austin Eckler, we saw put up an absolutely crazy RB1 season in one of his seasons, most of those guys have been back-end RB1s, if not high-end RB2s, which is fine. I don't care if you're an RB2. The thing is, I don't want to be drafting an RB2 if I'm supposed to be drafting an RB1. And I understand we have misses each and every year. I'm going to have my own misses this year. But when we're taking a look at Kenneth Walker, you're definitely having to draft him a little bit earlier than I would hope you'd have to draft him. My third player that I'm not drafting in 2026 fantasy football, it's going to be Chris Olave for the New Orleans Saints. And you guys see the Buckeye jerseys behind me? This is a very unbiased take because the bias in me would like to say, yeah, I love Chris Olave. He's a Buckeye forever. But he's the wide receiver 12 right now in fantasy football. And when you're looking at Chris Olave, what did the New Orleans Saints do this offseason? They added in Jordan Tyson. And this is a team that, yes, they do love to throw the ball. And if you take a look at overall how Chris Olave has performed in his career, we're talking about him last season having 156 targets, which was the most in his NFL career. Number one, because it's the healthiest that he's really been. But had 100 receptions for 1,100 yards, 11.6 yards per reception, and 9 total receiving touchdowns, which puts him in the total season, like we said, as the overall wide receiver 6. My concern is, can we see him, number one, take the next step? But is this kind of just going to be the range that he's going to be in? And how much is Jordan Tyson actually going to eat into Chris Olave's snaps? Because, again, Jordan Tyson was drafted with a top 8 pick. Both these guys are going to be alphas. And I think similar to if you guys tuned into a video like a few days ago when I was talking about CeeDee Lamb and how I think he's a great value at ADP, because I think there's enough volume for George Pickens and him. I think the same can be true for Chris Olave and Jordan Tyson. My big worry is, was last year Tyler Shuck, was that a fluke? Like, is there going to be some regression as teams start to lean into this Kellen Moore-led Saints? And I think a lot of people are excited about the Saints. You got Travis Etienne. I don't know if I can get that together, guys. I really don't know if I can switch at this point. But you got him in the backfield with Alvin Kamara back. They add some interesting tight end options like an Oscar Delp. Not to say that he's going to be the tight end one by any stretch of the imagination, but they added some pieces with Jordan Tyson and Chris Olave. I just don't know if I like this value, especially when there's guys in the same range. Like Rashee Rice, we've seen when he's healthy be a top 5 wide receiver. You got Devontae Smith, who's going to be taking over as the clear wide receiver 1 in his offense. And then you got Malik Neighbors also down, where Malik Neighbors probably wouldn't be going this range if he wasn't injured. And so for me, I just don't think I'm going to have a lot of Chris Olave in the spot. And I understand where you might be all over Chris Olave because you're like, the breakout's finally here. He's, 26 years old. He's in the prime of his career, Caleb. You're overthinking this. You could be overthinking it. I just think the value in this range, I like to lean other guys. So I know I'm not going to be leaving like any draft with Chris Olave. My next player that I refuse to draft is going to be Kyren Williams for the Rams. And when we're looking at Kyren Williams, my main argument with him is, yes, this offense is going to be absolutely amazing. He's coming off the board as the RB15 overall. That's just way too high when we saw Blake Corum absolutely stealing Kyren Williams cookies last year, coming off as the overall player 32. He's going ahead of Javonte Williams. He's going ahead of Josh Jacobs, Cam Scatterboo, going one spot behind Breece Hall. Listen, if I draft Kyren Williams, which I'm not going to, you better draft Blake Corum. Because otherwise, if you're the guy I'd rather wait until the 8th, 9th round and draft Blake Corum, because I think there's a really good chance that Blake Corum's actually the guy you want. Yes, the fantasy points per game the last 2 seasons, 17, 15.5, and even the year before that when it was his amazing waiver wire season where he put up 21.2 fantasy points per game, that was absolutely incredible. But when we take a look at his overall rushing attempts this last year, it went from 316 in 2024 with no Blake Corum to 259 last season. His rushing yards maintained the same, even though, he had less attempts, but his touchdowns went down to 10. What if with another year of Blake Corum, this goes down even more? What if he goes down to about 230 rushing attempts? We see his rushing touchdowns end up about 8, and they keep him a little bit more fresh for the playoffs. Because that's the thing with this Rams team that nobody's putting into consideration, is they're not playing for the regular season, guys. They have such a star-studded team. We're looking at Puka Nacua, Devontae Adams, Matthew Stafford. You got Myles Garrett. Is Aaron Donald going to return? I'm recording this when Aaron Donald has not announced that yet. Maybe that's going to happen over the next few days. To me, Kyren Williams just feels like a big, okay, he's going to be okay. But if I'm drafting in the middle part of the 3rd round, I don't just need okay. I need to be this guy to be an absolute RB2, RB1 for my fantasy football team. And I just don't know if that can happen. Now, the benefit to Kyren Williams, if there's I'm being negative Nelly over here in this video, is that he did have light boxes because nobody usually pushes the lineup. But the big thing with what happened with the Rams in this whole, 12, 13 personnel movement is they drafted Max Clare in the 2nd round after already drafting Terrence Ferguson last year. So I imagine they're going to be in a ton of 12 personnel where they're going to be in a bunch of loaded boxes to try to get the defense to come up so that then, of course, they can do the play action pass and get down the field. Which to me benefits the tight end and the wide receiver a lot more than it benefits a guy like a Kyren Williams. That's another reason that I'm going to be against Kyren Williams this season, ladies and gentlemen, and that is another reason why I will not be drafting him, and I am avoiding Kyren Williams in my 2026 fantasy football drafts. My 5th and final player that I refuse to draft in 2026 fantasy football drafts, it's going to be Alec Pierce for the Indianapolis Colts. And when we're talking about Alec Pierce, I'm a little bit worried about this tightrope surgery, and I'm just worried that maybe it's going to snap a little bit of the explosion. And then the second part of it is we see Michael Pittman Jr. leave in free agency. That's going to draw more coverage to Alec Pierce. Now, was he absolutely able to dominate in his first year, really being the featured role player here for the Indianapolis Colts? Yes, he was. I mean, they just paid the man an insane amount of money. I wish I was getting paid this amount of money. Now, if you take a look at his overall historical comps, if you're taking his 2025 stats, we got Russell Gage, Van Jefferson, Alan Lazard, Kenny Stills, Tyler Lockett, Rashid Shaheed, KJ Osborne, Jacoby Myers. That is a list where you like Tyler Lockett. Some of us need to put some more respect on freaking Tyler Lockett's name. This guy was an absolute killer, except when he was falling to the ground instead of getting some more yak. But wide receiver 37 is currently where people are drafting Alec Pierce in their drafts. Overall player 80, in the late 6th, early 7th round. To me, if I'm doing that and I'm drafting a Russell Gage, I just don't like the upside. And I think a lot of people are just assuming that this 12.2 fantasy points per game, which he averaged in 2025, is going to just somehow hold itself, or it's gonna get better. And clearly the Colts, let's say this, in the historic, program of the Colts, you got Reggie Wayne, you got Marvin Harrison Jr. I think Reggie Wayne thinks Alex Pierce can take a step, and he's like a homegrown talent, and he's developed. I just don't know if that, can you get to 14, 15, 16 fantasy points per game season? I don't know. There's just other guys in this range, especially when we're talking wide receiver. I'd almost rather take a shot on Quentin Johnson, who's in a Mike McDaniels offense. I'd rather take a shot on Michael Pittman Jr., who could be exactly who Aaron Rodgers needs on the slant over the middle. Even a little bit lower, like Chris Godwin on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers with no Mike Evans. I think there's just players in the Alec Pierce range that I prefer So I will not be drafting a ton of Alec Pierce. And so anyway, I appreciate you guys for tuning into this video. Hit that like and subscribe button if you want to see more 4for4 content. We are continuing to upload daily, posting shorts, posting full-length videos. And then, of course, if you want to use code YouTube to get 25% off any plan on the 4for4 website, where you can get amazing tools like this, where you can see comps, where you can see trade analysis during the season, where you can get waiver wire advice, where you can get the perfect draft cheat sheet. Make sure you check 4for4.com, and I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.